My official title is Post-Mortem Customer Service Representative. The company, Afterlife Inc., sells digital consciousness preservation, which is a fancy way of saying they back you up to a hard drive when you die. It's a growth industry. Most days, I answer tickets and watch the clock. The job consists of putting out small fires for people who are already ashes. A resident in the Topside Gardens, the premium 5-star Afterlife package, might file a complaint that the simulated sunset is rendering 2 minutes late. A guy in the basic halls might report a patch of digital mold growing on his apartment wall. I fill out a form, escalate it to a maintenance AI, and move on to the next ghost in the machine. Keeping a sense of detachment is part of the job description. We're even discouraged from full immersion, which is when a support agent has to go into the system as an avatar to handle a problem face-to-face. Management says it's for security. The veterans just say it's easier to hang up on the dead when you're not standing in their living room. For 4 years, I've taken that advice. I keep my head down, I collect my paycheck, and I try not to think too hard about where the servers are kept. Then came ticket number 734. It popped into my queue without the usual chime. No resident name, no zone assignment, just a string of corrupted characters and an origin tag that my system didn't recognize. X9. There is no Zone 9. The digital afterlife is neatly divided into 7 tiers, from the idyllic gardens down to the grim, featureless architecture of the economy suites. There is no 8th, and certainly no 9th. I almost deleted it as a system error, but a line of text in the complaint body caught my eye. It was clean, no corruption. They're taking things, not items, memories. They say my account is in arrears, sending collectors, please. I don't know what I owe. A debt complaint. Not unusual. People got confused about their payment plans all the time, especially the ones whose families handled the arrangements. But the word collectors was odd. Afterlife Inc. doesn't employ collectors. Unpaid accounts are just downgraded to a lower tier or in worst-case scenarios put into suspended animation. It's all automated, clean. I typed a standard reply. We have received your query. Can you please verify your resident ID and current zone to help us resolve your issue? I hit send. The system returned an immediate error. Recipient not found. My finger went to the close ticket button. A glitch. A piece of stray code. Not my problem. But my hand stopped. The message was still there. A single line of panic in a void of corrupted data. I read it again. I don't know what I owe. On a hunch, I tried to pull the ticket's metadata, see its routing history. The moment I entered the command, the screen changed. The ticket's text grayed out. Red letters appeared over it, stark and final. Case closed. Do not pursue. Beneath that, the entire body of the complaint was replaced with a single, unclickable string. Data protected. Security override. The ticket was now locked. I couldn't edit it, couldn't reopen it, couldn't even send it to my own archives. It just sat there in my queue, a digital scar. I leaned back in my chair, the plastic groaning under my weight. My jaw was tight. This was new. In 4 years, I had seen system crashes, lost data, and even a resident who managed to hack his avatar to look like a 9-foot-tall rooster. I had never seen a ticket lock itself. I flagged my supervisor. A moment later, Life Connery's face appeared in a video window on my monitor. He looked immaculate, as always, his smile perfectly calibrated. Behind him, a generic office plant stood under a warm, pleasant light. "Dane," he said, his voice smooth as a press release. "What can I do for you on this fine Tuesday?" "I've got an anomaly in my queue," I said, sharing my screen. "Ticket number 734. It came from an invalid zone, and when I tried to pull logs, it locked itself." Life's eyes scanned the screen. His smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges. "Ah, yes. We get these from time to time. Legacy code fragments. The system is just purging some junk data. Good catch. You can go ahead and delete it." "It won't let me," I said. "It's completely locked down." I pointed to the redaction notice. And I've never seen a security override like this. It feels intentional. Leif's eyes sharpened for a fraction of a second. The system has protocols in place that we aren't always privy to, Dane. It's for operational integrity. This isn't something we need to worry about. Just leave it. It will probably clear itself from the queue by morning. He leaned in, his tone shifting to one of a trusted confidant. Look, I appreciate your diligence, I really do. But some doors are locked for a reason. Trying to pick them doesn't do anyone any favors. Just let it be. He was shutting me down, but wrapping it in a bow. It was his signature move. Right, I said. Just a glitch. Exactly. The smile returned, full wattage. Now, I see Mrs. Albright in the gardens just filed a ticket about her prize-winning roses losing their scent. That's a perfect one for you to handle. Keep up the great work. The call ended. I was left staring at the locked complaint. It hadn't cleared itself. It was still there, silently refusing to be ignored. He's right, you know. The voice came from the cubicle behind me. I turned to see Merrick Holden, a senior agent who'd been with the company since it was a startup, run out of a garage. He was hunched over, his shoulders permanently rounded from decades of desk work. Leif? I asked. God, no. Leif's an idiot, Merrick grunted, not looking up from his own screen. I mean about the doors. Some of them, you don't want to know what's on the other side. You just want to be grateful they're closed. He finally swiveled in his chair, his eyes tired but sharp. You're the kid who dropped out of community college, right? General studies? Yeah, I said, a little defensively. That's me. Here's some general advice. This job is about maintenance, not justice. We're janitors. We sweep up the messes. If you find a stain that won't come out, you don't start ripping up the floorboards. You put a rug over it and walk away. He nodded toward my screen. That's a stain. Get a rug. He turned back to his work, the conversation over. I stared back at the locked ticket. Leif's corporate non-answer and Merrick's weary cynicism should have been enough. I should have taken the advice, moved on to the scentless roses and the endless queue of minor, fixable problems. But I couldn't. The ticket was a black hole in the middle of my screen, pulling at my attention. It was the system itself telling me to look away, which only made me want to look harder. My own access was a dead end, but every ticket before it's assigned gets logged in a temporary, system-wide intake buffer. It's a messy, rolling feed of raw data that's overwritten every few minutes. A digital floodplain. If I was fast, and if I used a few of the back-end search commands that Bram Orlick, our perpetually nervous systems administrator, had once shown me, I might be able to catch a fragment of the original file before it was gone for good. It was a stupid risk. My query would be logged, and if Roth from compliance ever saw it, I'd be in a week of disciplinary hearings. But I did it anyway. I ran the search, my fingers moving quickly, my eyes darting between the command line and the door to Leif's office. A string of text flashed on my screen. A single line from the original, unredacted complaint log, captured an instant before it was scrubbed. They're not on the payroll. They're on the ledger. The line of text vanished as the buffer refreshed, but the words were burned into my mind. The ledger. It sounded archaic, biblical. Not like something you'd find in a state-of-the-art digital afterlife. Payroll is for people. A ledger is for accounts, debts and credits. An impartial, inhuman tally. For the rest of the afternoon, I did my job. I resolved the issue of the scentless roses, a simple sensory patch. I answered a query about a flickering light in a basic hall common area. I processed 36 other minor complaints, each one a neat, tidy problem with a neat, tidy solution. But with every ticket I closed, the locked one remained, a dead pixel in my field of vision, and the word ledger stuck in the back of my thoughts. At 4:30, half an hour before my shift ended, I got up from my desk. Bram Orlick worked in the server room, A small, chilly space in the basement that smelled of conditioned air and warm plastic. He was the only sysadmin on this floor who didn't treat support staff like a lower form of life, mostly because he seemed to be terrified of all forms of life equally. I found him hunched over a rack of servers, his lanky frame folded into a pretzel. A tangle of multicolored cables spilled from an open panel at his feet. "Bram," I said. He flinched, dropping a small screwdriver. It clattered on the raised floor. "Dane, geez, you shouldn't sneak up on people down here." He scrambled to pick up the tool. "What's broken now? Don't tell me the gardens are lagging again. Leif already sent me 3 memos about the simulated bee pollination cycles." "Nothing's broken. I need a favor. Off the record." His eyes, already wide, seemed to expand. "Off the record? I don't do off the record. Off the record gets you audited by Roth." He said the name Roth, our head of compliance, like it was a curse. "Everything we do is logged, every keystroke. You know that. This isn't about me. It's about a ticket." I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture I'd taken of the locked complaint screen. "Ticket number 734. It came in this morning and bricked itself. Leif told me to ignore it." Bram squinted at the phone. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Security override? Yeah, I've seen a few of these. Not often. It's a deep system lock. Nothing you or I can touch." He handed the phone back, already turning away. "Sorry, can't help." "The original log mentioned a ledger," I said. He froze. His back was still to me, but I saw his shoulders tense up. He slowly turned his head. "What did you just say?" "A ledger. The complaint said the collectors weren't on the payroll. They were on the ledger. You know what that is?" Bram looked past me, down the long aisle of servers, as if checking for eavesdroppers. "It's not a real thing," he whispered. "It's a story, a myth for new hires. The ghost in the machine." "This resident didn't think it was a myth," I pressed. "They were terrified." "What is it, Bram?" He finally turned to face me fully, wringing his hands. "It's code. Supposedly. Part of the original architecture from before Afterlife went public. The story is that the founders built a separate accounting system, a kind of metaphysical failsafe to track the cosmic balance sheet, to make sure no soul got a free ride." He gave a short, nervous laugh that had no humor in it. "It's nonsense, of course, a bug that people spun into a campfire tale. And the collectors?" "That's part of the story too," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "If the ledger finds an account that's imbalanced, unauthorized, underpaid, whatever, it dispatches an enforcement protocol. An unlogged process to reconcile the account." He shook his head, looking at the floor. "It's a stupid ghost story, Dane. This ticket was from Zone X9. Bram's face went pale. "That's not possible. There are 7 zones." "I know. So either a resident in a place that doesn't exist is being haunted by a ghost story, or there's something real down in the system's basement that no one wants to talk about." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "I just want to know what's on that ledger. I need you to look." "No," he said, shaking his head again, more forcefully this time. "Absolutely not. Poking around in the core architecture? Roth would have my access revoked before I could even run a search. He has alerts for that kind of query. For all I know, he has alerts for the word ledger." He started fussing with the cables again, a clear signal that the conversation was over. I didn't move. "What if I could give you a search string that bypasses the primary logs? One that routes through the old diagnostic ports, the ones you told me about last year when the whole messaging system went down." He paused. He remembered. We'd been stuck here until 3 a.m. fixing a system-wide crash, and in a moment of exhausted camaraderie, he'd shown me a few of the system's back doors. "That's different," he stammered. "That was an emergency." "This feels like one," I said quietly. "Someone filed a complaint from hell, Bram, and the company's response was to lock the door and pretend they didn't hear it. I just want to know why, don't you?" He stood there for a long time, chewing on his lower lip. He was at war with himself, his ingrained fear of authority versus the fundamental curiosity of a man who loved systems and hated unanswered questions. Finally, he let out a long, defeated sigh. "This is a monumentally bad idea," he breathed. "Give me the search string. I'll look tonight, from my home terminal, fewer eyes on it." He wouldn't look at me. "But if anything comes back at me, I don't know you. We never had this conversation. Clear?" "Clear," I said, a knot in my own gut starting to loosen. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said, finally meeting my eyes. His were full of a dread that looked far too real for a ghost story. "You have no idea what you're asking me to do." I left the server room feeling like I had just armed a bomb and handed the timer to the most nervous man on Earth. The rest of my shift dragged by under a thin layer of pretend. I didn't speak to Merrick again. I avoided Leif's line of sight. When the clock finally hit 5, I walked out into the grey evening, the single sentence from the log file still turning over and over in my head. That night, sleep was a shallow, restless thing. I kept waking up, convinced I'd heard the chime of an incoming message, but my phone was always dark. By the time I got to the office the next morning, my jaw was tight, like I'd been chewing concrete in my sleep. The locked ticket was still in my queue, unchanged. Bram's desk, across the office floor, was empty. He usually came in early. I imagined him discovered, his access privileges revoked, a blank-faced Jonas Roth escorting him out of the building. I spent the first hour of my shift staring at my screen, not really seeing the complaints that scrolled past. My focus was a tight beam aimed at the empty space where Bram should be. Then, at 9:15, he scurried in, head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. He didn't look at me. He sat at his desk, powered on his terminal, and immediately became absorbed in his work. He hadn't found anything, I thought, or he'd gotten spooked and backed out. The disappointment was a sharp, physical pang. I turned back to my own queue, the brief spark of hope extinguished. I was back to square one, with a locked ticket and a ghost story. An hour later, I got up to get coffee. My route took me past Bram's desk. As I walked by, he suddenly lurched to the side as if his chair had slipped, dropping a stack of printouts. Papers scattered across the floor. "Clumsy," he muttered, his face flushed as he bent down to gather them. As I passed, he looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a bare second. They were wild with fear. He shoved the papers into a messy pile, but one small, folded piece of paper remained on the floor by my foot. It was an intentional piece of clumsiness. I didn't break my stride. I continued to the coffee machine. I filled my cup, added the powdered creamer, and stirred it with a plastic stick, my movements slow and measured. On my way back, I paused by his desk. I bent down as if to tie my shoe and scooped up the folded note. "You okay, Bram?" "Fine," he squeaked, not looking at me. "Just Monday." It was Wednesday. Back at my desk, I shielded the note with my body and unfolded it in my lap. It was a printout of a system diagnostic, but scrawled in the margins in Bram's spidery, barely legible handwriting were a few frantic lines. "It's real! Called the Reconciliation Ledger. Old, deep, not AI. More like an abacus, just counts, found references, audits. They're not glitches, they're entries, debits." Below that was a single line. "A resident ID, AR 7713, August Riley, status under review, recurrent." The final 2 words were circled multiple times, the pen having dug into the paper. "He knows. He's in there. Don't use my name." I read the note 3 times, an abacus, a simple counting machine at the heart of this sprawling, complex system. And August Riley. It sounded like a man trapped in a loop, a problem that could never be resolved. I had to talk to him. A text-based chat was too easy to log, too easy to fake. If I was going to get the truth, I had to do it face to face. I had to go in. My eyes drifted to the immersion station in the corner of the office. It was a sleek, black chair with a polished chrome headset rig, looking more like a high-end dentist's chair than a portal to the afterlife. I had used it exactly once, during my initial training 4 years ago. The experience had been disorienting, the digital world too clean, too perfect. I had resolved never to go back in unless I absolutely had to. I looked down at the note in my hand, then at the locked ticket in my queue. This was it. The moment I had to stop looking for floorboards to rip up and start going through the floor myself. I took a slow, deep breath. Then I stood up and walked toward the Immersion station. Every head in my row turned to watch. No one spoke. Going into the system voluntarily was like a priest choosing to live in a leper colony. It wasn't done. I settled into the chair. It molded itself to my back. I pulled the headset over my eyes. The world went dark. A calm, female voice, the standard system interface, spoke in my ears. "Welcome, Agent Mills. Please state your destination." "Basic halls, Sector Gamma," I said. "That's where the resident manifest placed August Riley. Avatar connection protocol. Initiate." "Initiating," the voice replied. There was a soft click, a feeling of pressure at the base of my skull, and then the darkness dissolved. The darkness wasn't replaced with light, but with information, a rush of it flowing past my consciousness. For a half second I was nowhere, not in the chair, not in the system, just a disembodied point of view. Then the world coalesced around me, snapping into place with the soundless finality of a puzzle piece locking in. I was standing in a long, wide corridor. The basic halls. The architecture was aggressively neutral. Walls the color of weak tea, floors a polished, seamless grey. There were no windows, only panels on the walls that glowed with a soft, uniform light. The air was perfectly still. It was the visual equivalent of hold music. I looked down at my hands. They were pale and unblemished, the hands of a mannequin. My clothes were the standard support avatar uniform, a simple dark grey jumpsuit, functional, anonymous. I flexed my fingers, and the digital ones mimicked the motion with a microsecond of lag that was just long enough to feel off. The disconnect was immediate, a sense of puppeteering a body from a great distance. A few other residents were scattered throughout the hall. Their limited customization options were a quiet marker of their social standing in the hereafter. A man in a slightly too large brown suit stared at a glowing panel. A woman with hair that looked like a single, solid piece of plastic sat on a bench, her hands folded in her lap. They were running their allotted programs, existing. I mentally accessed my admin interface. It appeared in my vision as a transparent overlay, invisible to anyone else. I typed in the name, August Riley. A marker appeared in my HUD, pointing down the hall and to the left into a designated social space called a common. I started walking. My footsteps made no sound on the polished floor. The common was a large, circular room with the same bland decor as the hall. More benches, more glowing panels. In the center of the room, a man was standing in front of a small, square table. He was meticulously arranging a set of grey digital blocks, stacking them into a small tower, then knocking it down, then starting again. His avatar was older, with a thin face and hair that was just beginning to recede. His movements were precise, repetitive. His status hovered above him in my admin view, AR 7713, August Riley. I walked over. August? He didn't look up. He carefully placed another block on his tower. It was 6 blocks high. August Riley? I tried again. This time he paused. He looked at me, but his eyes were unfocused, as if looking at something 1,000 yards behind me. I think so. They tell me that's my name. This week. This week? Sometimes it changes, he said simply. He turned back to his tower and placed another block. It wobbled. They do resets. For integrity. To keep things running smooth. He knocked the tower over. The blocks clattered against the tabletop with a sound that was too sharp. He began to stack them again. Are you from support? Yes, my name is Dane. I'm following up on a report. A report, he repeated. He looked at his hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. I don't remember filing a report. It might have been a while ago, I said carefully. It was about your account, about an unpaid balance and collectors. His hands stopped moving. A tremor started in his fingers. His unfocused gaze snapped to mine. You shouldn't say that word, he hissed, his voice dropping. They listen. They always listen. Who listens, August? The men in the dark suits, he whispered, leaning closer. They come when you're not expecting it. They ask you questions you can't answer, about things you did before, things from outside. He gestured vaguely as if indicating the world beyond the simulation. And if you can't pay, they take things, a memory, a face, a name. They just wipe a piece of you away, to balance the books. His avatar was starting to glitch. The edges of his form wavered, a brief sizzle of static corrupting his outline. I don't remember what I owe, he said, his voice cracking. I try to remember, but every time I get close, it's like reaching into a drawer and finding it empty, over and over. That's enough. The new voice was deep and steady. It came from behind me. I turned to see a broad-shouldered man with a thick greying beard and a severe expression. His avatar was customized with small, defiant touches, a worn leather-like jacket over his jumpsuit, an analog watch face on his wrist. He put a firm, reassuring hand on August's shoulder. He's not well, friend, the man said, his eyes fixed on me. He gets confused. We look after our own here. My admin HUD identified him. Felix Duval, informal community leader, an organizer, and according to the notes on his file, a rationalist and a skeptic. I'm just trying to help, I said. Are you? Felix's gaze was sharp, analytical. Or are you stirring up trouble? We have enough to deal with. System bugs, memory decay, the general crushing boredom of eternity, without adding ghost stories about phantom debt collectors to the mix. It's not a story. He's terrified. I'm trying to find out why. He's terrified because he's a fragmented consciousness running on repurposed server space, son, Felix said, his tone blunt but not unkind. We all are. Some of us just hold it together better than others. He looked from me to August, who had already returned to stacking his blocks, his moment of lucidity gone. Spreading rumors about men in dark suits only makes things worse. It causes panic, and panic leads to instability. I won't have that in my block. He was a wall of reason and order built to protect his people from the very thing I was trying to prove was real. I'm not spreading rumors, I said, my frustration making my voice tight. I have a ticket, a complaint. Then resolve it through the proper channels. Felix countered, crossing his arms. File your reports. Escalate to your superiors. Don't come down here and badger vulnerable residents. We aren't your lab rats. He stepped between me and August, a clear dismissal. Your help isn't needed here, Agent. We can handle our own. There was no arguing with him. He wasn't being malicious. He was being a leader, protecting his flock from a wolf he couldn't see. To him, I was the threat, a disruption to the fragile peace they had managed to build in this digital purgatory. Arguing would only make me look more like a fanatic. I gave a single tight nod. Understood. I turned and walked away. August hadn't looked up again. He was back to his blocks, building and destroying his small grey world. A man trapped in the endless loop of a corrupted file. I found an empty spot in the main corridor and initiated the logout sequence. The world dissolved around me, the transition out smoother, quicker than the one in. The darkness returned, followed by the sensation of my own body in the immersion chair. I pulled the headset off. The office was the same. The low murmur of keyboards, the drone of the air conditioning. Merrick was still hunched over his terminal. Leif was nowhere to be seen. No one looked at me, but something felt different. A new message was blinking on every monitor in the room, a company-wide banner. System Update 8.1.4. A mandatory security patch has been successfully deployed to enhance resident stability and resolve legacy data conflicts. Thank you for your cooperation in maintaining a secure afterlife. A security patch. It was too much of a coincidence. My mind immediately went to August Riley, a man trapped in a loop of recurrent reviews, a living, breathing legacy conflict. I sat down at my desk, my own screen displaying the same cheerful message. I dismissed it. My first instinct was to act on the information I had, the one solid lead in this entire mess. I still had Bram's note folded in my pocket. I needed to pull August Riley's full file, look at his history, his original date of upload, anything that might explain why he was being targeted. I typed in the ID, AR 7713. I hit enter. The system responded instantly. No resident found. I stared at the screen. A typo. It had to be a typo. I pulled the crumpled note from my pocket and smoothed it out on the desk. The spidery handwriting was clear. AR 7713. I typed it again carefully, character by character. No resident found. I tried searching by name. August Riley. No resident found. He was gone. Not under review. Not status pending. Gone. Wiped from the directory as if he had never existed. The security patch hadn't been a patch, it had been an erasure. My visit to the basic halls had been a tripwire. I hadn't just observed him, I had flagged him for deletion. The system hadn't changed my logs. It had changed the world my logs referred to. The note in my hand was now a ghost story, a piece of evidence that pointed to a man who, according to the official record, was a fiction. My hand was resting on my mouse. I looked down at it. For a single horrifying second, my index finger dissolved. It didn't vanish. It broke apart into a cascade of shimmering, multicolored pixels, a tiny, self-contained explosion of static. It lasted no more than a heartbeat, a visual stutter in reality. Then it was gone, and my finger was solid again, resting on the plastic. I jerked my hand back, pulling it into my lap as if it had been burned. I stared at my finger. It was normal, flesh, nail, knuckle. But I had seen it. It was a visual artifact from the system, a debuff icon, a graphical error. But it wasn't on a screen, it was on me. The system wasn't just in the immersion chair anymore. A piece of it had followed me out. I squeezed my hand into a fist, the knuckles white. The locked ticket was still on my screen. Felix Duval was still standing guard over a community he couldn't protect. And August Riley, the man I was trying to save, had been deleted from existence because of me. The stain Merrick had warned me about wasn't just on the floor anymore. It was on my hands. I kept my hand in a fist under the desk, a hard knot of bone and flesh. I could still feel the phantom sizzle, the ghost of a sensation that had no physical cause. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a message, a warning. The system wasn't just a place I could visit anymore. It was a place that could visit me. I looked around the office. Nothing had changed. My co-workers were tapping away at their keyboards. The air conditioner hummed its monotonous tune. It was all so crushingly normal, and that was the most terrifying part. A piece of digital horror had just manifested on my body, and the world hadn't even blinked. My terminal pinged. A new ticket. A resident's digital cat had run away. I stared at the words, my mind unable to process them. A cat. My finger had dissolved, and someone was worried about a cat. I couldn't stay here. I stood up, my chair scraping back with a sound that felt loud enough to crack the walls. A few people looked up, annoyed by the noise. I ignored them and walked toward the men's room. Inside, I went straight to the sink and turned on the water. I plunged my hands under the stream, scrubbing at them, the soap harsh and thin. I wasn't trying to get them clean. I was trying to feel if they were real. The water was cold. The porcelain of the sink was hard against my knuckles. It was all there, solid. I looked up into the mirror. My face was pale, my hair a mess. My eyes were wide, the pupils too large. But it was me. It hadn't followed me here. Then my reflection wavered. For a split second, the image in the mirror lagged, a frame behind my own movements. I stopped breathing, my eyes locked on the glass. The reflection caught up, syncing perfectly. But the message had been delivered again. You are not safe. A soft, polite knock came from the door. Dane? It's Leaf. Everything all right in there? I dried my hands on a rough paper towel. I took a breath, forced calm into my expression, and opened the door. You rushed out of there. Looked like you'd seen a ghost. He gave a small, corporate chuckle. It didn't reach his eyes. Just a headache, I lied. The screen gets to you after a while. I know what you mean, he said, nodding sympathetically. But he wasn't here for a wellness check. He fell into step beside me as I walked back toward my desk. That security patch seems to have done the trick, huh? Lots of those old data conflicts have been resolved. The system's running smoother than ever. He was talking about August. Resolved. That's what they called it. Good to hear, I said. It is, Leaf agreed. He stopped at my cubicle, leaning against the partition, an image of casual authority. In fact, your diligence on that locked ticket didn't go unnoticed. You flagged an anomaly and the system fixed it. That's good work. Proactive. The word proactive felt like an accusation. He was praising me for leading them to August. I was just doing my job. Well, you did it well, Leif continued, his smile never wavering. So well, in fact, that your name came up this morning. Jonas Roth's office has been taking a closer look at how we handle these legacy cases. He's all about integrity, Jonas. He wants to make sure all the accounts are properly settled. He let the words hang there. Roth. Settled. It was the language of the ledger, of the ghost story that was proving to be all too real. He was impressed that a Tier 1 agent showed so much initiative. He likes agents who aren't afraid to dig. The threat was no longer veiled. It was a searchlight, and it was pointed directly at me. Keep digging, he was saying, and see what you find. He was giving me enough rope to hang myself. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to seem friendly, but felt like a manacle locking into place. Anyway, just wanted to say thanks. Keep up the good work. He walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of my own cubicle. I was no longer an anonymous agent. I was a person of interest. My actions had been noted, logged, and escalated. The system had marked me with a glitch. The company had marked me with a compliment. Both were warnings. Both were promises. I sank into my chair, my body feeling anchored. The digital cat was still waiting. I looked at the ticket, then at my own hand. For now, it was solid. I mechanically typed a reply for the missing cat ticket. Have you tried checking the resident directory for your companion's last known location? Standard procedure. I closed the ticket and watched it vanish from my queue, replaced by another, equally meaningless problem. Each click of the mouse felt like a betrayal of the truth I now carried. August Riley was gone. My finger had dissolved. Leif Connery had put a target on my back. And here I was, troubleshooting digital pets. I couldn't continue, not like this. Waiting for Jonas Roth's audit to land on me was a death sentence, just a slower one. The passivity that had been my shield for 4 years was now just a cage, and the walls were closing in. I had to do something. Bram was a dead end. I'd already pushed him past his breaking point. Leif was the enemy. That left one person who might listen, who had to listen. Felix Duval. He had stood up for August. He believed in community, in order. He just didn't believe in ghosts. I needed to give him a ghost he couldn't deny, but what could I show him? August was a blank entry in the system. The locked ticket was untouchable. My own glitching hand was something he'd dismiss as a symptom of my own paranoia. I needed fresh evidence. I needed to find another name on that ledger, another person under review, and get to them before the next security patch wiped them from the board. I had to prove the pattern. As if on cue, a new banner unfurled across the top of my monitor. This one wasn't a cheerful announcement. The text was amber, the color of caution. System alert. Audit cycle incoming. 1900 system time. All immersed personnel are advised to log out. All residents, please remain in your assigned zones. A murmur went through the office. Keyboards stopped clicking. Everyone was reading the same message. Audit night. The whispered about event, the system's self-cleansing ritual, was happening tonight. Merrick swore under his breath beside me. "Here we go," he muttered. "What is it?" I asked, though I already knew. The ledger. The reconciliation. This was the mechanism. Merrick leaned over the low partition between our cubicles. His face was stripped of its usual wry detachment. "It's not a maintenance cycle, kid. It's a hunt. They say it's when the system flags ledger anomalies. That's corporate speak for people who don't add up right." He stared at me, his eyes searching my face. He knew I hadn't dropped it. He knew I'd kept digging. "I heard a story once," he continued, his eyes distant, "about an agent from the development team, a guy named Carter. Got too curious about a string of resident disappearances. Decided to stay in the system during an audit night. Thought his admin privileges would protect him. He wanted to see the collectors for himself. What happened? No one knows for sure. He logged out the next morning, but he was different. Quiet. He'd stare at his screen for hours without typing. One day, he told his supervisor his own avatar felt like a stranger, said it didn't fit right anymore. A week later, he put in his resignation. I saw him on his last day. He looked hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and scooped out whatever made him him. Whatever he saw in there, it broke him. The system doesn't just delete you, Dane. It can rewrite you. Stay out of the storm. You don't want to get flagged. He turned back to his screen, the warning delivered. I looked at the alert banner, then at the immersion chair in the corner of the room. A hunt, a storm, a process that rewrites you. And it was my only chance. If the collectors, the repo agents, were active during the audit, that was the one time I could see them in action. It was the one time I might be able to identify a target before they were erased. If I could get to Felix, show him a neighbor being dragged away by men in dark suits, he wouldn't be able to rationalize it. He wouldn't be able to deny it. Every rational instinct told me to log my hours, go home, and pretend none of this ever happened. But August's terrified face flashed in my mind. I don't remember what I owe. Then my own reflection in the mirror, lagging a half-second behind reality. They were already hunting me. Hiding wouldn't save me. It would just mean I died alone. My choice was made. I was going back in. And I was going in tonight, during the storm. The rest of the afternoon was a study in controlled dread. Seconds dragged by as I stared at the clock. Then minutes would vanish in a blink while my mind raced. I didn't answer a single new ticket. I just sat there, an island of stillness waiting for the storm. Around 6, people started packing up. They logged out of their terminals, slid on their jackets and offered tired, "See you tomorrows," to their neighbors. No one said a word about the audit. It was an incoming hurricane that everyone pretended was just a bit of weather. By 6:30, the office was mostly empty. At 6:45, Merrick Holden stood up. He gathered his things, then paused and looked over at me. His face held the quiet certainty of someone who'd stopped hoping for a different outcome. He didn't offer another warning. He just gave me a slow nod, the kind a man gives a soldier he knows isn't coming back from the front. Then he left. I was alone. The audit was set to begin in 15 minutes. I stood and walked to the immersion chair. Each step was a choice, a confirmation of the decision I had made. I settled into the chair and pulled the headset down. The darkness was immediate. "Welcome, Agent Mills," the system voice said, calm and oblivious. "Please state your destination." "Basic Halls, Sector Gamma," I said again. "Felix's neighborhood." "Initiate connection." "Initiating," the voice replied. A warning flashed in my peripheral vision, text I hadn't seen before. Active audit cycle detected. Immersion is not advised. Override, I said. Proceed. There was a half-second of hesitation. Then the soft click at the base of my skull. The world didn't snap into place this time. It bled into existence, colors running at the edges as if the rendering process was under strain. When it finally stabilized, I was back in the main corridor of the basic halls. But it was different. The soft, even light from the wall panels was gone, replaced by a dim, amber glow that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a diseased heart. The residents were gone from the main thoroughfare. The halls were empty, abandoned. Every glowing panel, once a blank slate, now displayed the same message in stark block letters. Audit in progress. Remain in your assigned zone. Non-compliance will be logged. I was an anomaly here, an agent outside of the designated safe hours, a piece of grit in the gears. I brought up my admin HUD, my eyes darting down the empty corridor. The marker for Felix's common flashed on the display. It was 3 sections over. I started to move, my soundless steps feeling urgent in the silence. A pop-up window exploded in front of my face, blocking my view. It was a stark white box with a single line of text. Identity verification required. State your function. Agent Dane Mills, support ticket follow-up. I was feeding the machine a lie it was programmed to accept, hoping it would be enough. The box vanished. I kept moving. As I rounded the first corner, I saw a digital barrier. A shimmering wall of what looked like dark, translucent energy was descending from the ceiling, slowly sealing off the corridor behind me. A lockdown. I broke into a run, a strange, floaty motion that my brain struggled to command. The barrier hissed as it met the floor, the seal absolute. I was penned in. I reached the entrance to Sector Gamma just as another barrier began to descend. I slid through the gap with a second to spare. The wall slammed down behind me, cutting me off. This new section was different. The residents weren't hiding. They were gathered in small, terrified clusters, whispering to each other, their avatars flashing with the digital equivalent of anxiety. And at the center of the largest group, standing tall and trying to project an aura of calm he clearly didn't feel, was Felix Duval. He saw me the moment I entered. His face, already lined with worry, tightened with fury. He broke from the group and strode toward me. "You!" he spat. "What in the hell are you doing here? I told you to stay away. I told you we handle our own. Your block is being audited, Felix. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to watch." "Watch what?" "Watch my people descend into panic because you keep whispering about monsters in the dark. You've done enough. Get out before you make things worse." "They're coming," I said, my voice dropping, urgent. "The men in the dark suits, the collectors, they're coming here for one of your people. August was just the first. I can't prove it to you with logs or tickets. The system erases the proof, so I'm asking you to do one thing, just one. Don't fight me, don't argue, just stand here with me and watch." He stared at me, his jaw working, caught between his instinct to protect his community and the unnerving certainty in my voice. A new sound carried down the hall. It was a clear, piercing chime, utterly different from the ambient noise of the system. It was the sound of a bell being struck once. Every resident in the hall froze. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Felix's eyes widened, a flash of genuine fear finally breaking through his anger. "What was that?" he whispered. "That," I said, my eyes fixed on the far end of the corridor, where the amber light darkened into a pool of shadow, "is the system flagging an account for reconciliation." The chime faded. Every resident in the hall was frozen, their digital faces turned toward the dark end of the corridor. Felix stood beside me, his anger gone, replaced by a rigid, watchful fear. His skepticism hadn't just been shattered, it had been vaporized. Above the head of a woman standing near the front of the crowd, a woman with a kind face and hair pulled back in a simple, graying bun, a single word appeared. It materialized in the air, glowing with the same amber light as the walls. "Flagged." A collective shudder went through the residents. They scrambled back, away from the woman. A circle of empty space formed around her, a quarantine zone created by pure terror. She stood alone, her hands clasped in front of her, her body trembling. I saw Felix's mouth form a name, a choked whisper. Martha. He knew her. Of course he did. He knew all of them. From the pool of shadow at the far end of the hall, two figures emerged. They didn't walk out of the darkness. The darkness itself seemed to extrude them into existence. They were tall and thin, dressed in severe, dark uniforms. They moved without a sound, gliding over the polished floor, their movements too smooth, too perfect. They were inhumanly efficient. Their faces were the worst part. They weren't faces at all. They were shifting, pixelated voids, blurs of corrupted data that flickered and churned. As they grew closer, I could almost see other faces within the static. Fragments of eyes, mouths, expressions, flashing for a millisecond before being swallowed by the digital noise. They were walking collections of erased people, the repo agents, the collectors. They glided toward Martha, their purpose absolute, their pace unhurried. The crowd of residents pressed themselves back against the walls, a silent, terrified audience. Felix moved. It was a pure, unthinking reaction, the instinct of a shepherd defending his flock. He stepped forward, planting himself between the approaching agents and the trembling woman. "Stop," he commanded, his voice shaking but loud. "Who are you? By what authority do you—" He didn't get to finish. The lead agent didn't break its stride. It simply raised a hand. A wall of shimmering black code, scrawled with unreadable symbols, came into existence just in front of Felix, blocking his path. He stumbled back as if he'd run into solid glass. He pressed against it, his hands flat on the surface, but it was immovable. He was locked out, forced to watch. The agents reached Martha. She didn't scream. She just looked at them, her face a portrait of hopeless acceptance. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, leaving no trace. One agent stood before her, the other behind. They moved in perfect unison, raising their hands and placing them on her shoulders. The moment they made contact, Martha's avatar began to decay. There was no violence, no sound of a struggle. It was a quiet, orderly process of dissolution. Her form dissolved from the edges inward, breaking apart into a soft cascade of data points. It was like watching a sandcastle disintegrate in a gentle tide. The sound was a dry, continuous whisper, like thousands of tiny bits of paper being torn at once. Her face was the last thing to go, her expression of quiet terror dissolving into a cloud of meaningless light. In 5 seconds, she was gone. Where she had stood, nothing remained. No file icon, no error message, just empty space. The system hadn't just deleted her, it had scrubbed the very spot where she existed. The wall of code in front of Felix vanished. The show was over. The remaining residents began to weep. Not loud, wailing sobs, but the quiet, broken sounds of people who have just witnessed a fundamental law of their reality being brutally enforced. Felix fell to his knees. He wasn't looking at the empty space where Martha had been. He was looking at his own hands, his customized, mortal hands, as if he no longer trusted them to be real. He slowly looked up at me, his face aged by 100 years in the last 2 minutes. "You were right," he said, his voice a dead thing. The words offered no satisfaction, no victory. They were just an epitaph. We had the proof. We had the ghost, and it had just eaten one of his friends. I looked down at my own hand. In the amber light, I saw it again. The skin on my knuckles was fizzing, a small, controlled eruption of static. The system was still watching me. It was reminding me that my own name could be on that ledger. The chime sounded again. It was louder this time, sharper, a shard of ice in the ear. Another man in the crowd, a short, stocky man in a worn-out digital cardigan, cried out as the amber word, "flagged," bloomed above his head. At the exact same moment, it appeared over another resident, a young woman who looked barely out of her teens, two at once. The system wasn't just auditing anymore, it was purging. Panic finally boiled over. A few residents broke from the walls and ran, their flight futile as they slammed into the invisible barriers of the quarantine, recoiling from the touch of the code. This was the final, cascading failure. The balancing of the ledger had become a bloodbath. It was in that moment of chaos that my admin HUD, the transparent overlay only I could see, went haywire. A section of the interface, the part that usually displayed system temperature and server loads, dissolved into a block of raw green code. The text scrolled by so fast I could barely keep up. Then it stopped and turned into a basic command line screen. Two files showed up: ghost door and kill switch. Below them, a single line of text typed itself out, the letters appearing one by one in Merrick's blunt, no-nonsense style. The door out, or the gun to shoot the house down. Your choice. Make it count. The message was a jolt of ice water. Merrick. He'd left me a legacy, a choice, a way out, or a way to fight back, a ghost door, a kill switch. My hand, the real one, clenched into a fist in the immersion chair miles away. I focused on the first file. Ghost door. An emergency exit. A back door for agents trapped behind a system firewall. Carter, the agent who saw the collectors and came back broken, probably hadn't had one of these. This was survival. I could activate it, eject myself from the system, and be back in the silent, empty office. I could walk away, find a new job, and spend the rest of my life trying to forget the sound of that chime. Then I looked at the second file. Kill switch. The name was a brutal promise. It wouldn't be a clean fix. A tool like this, a legacy exploit from the system's oldest layers, wouldn't be surgical. It would be a bomb, a messy, chaotic, desperate act of sabotage, a way to hurt the system back. The file's description appeared briefly beside its name. Sever active connection between flagged node and reconciliation ledger. Warning, high probability of catastrophic data corruption to user. It wouldn't just be shooting the house down, it would be holding the gun as it backfired. The chime rang out a third time. The two newly flagged residents were gone, erased in the same efficient manner as Martha. The two repo agents stood in the empty space, their faceless heads turning slowly, scanning their prey. Then they stopped. Both voids swiveled in unison until they were aimed directly at the man kneeling on the floor, at the leader who had dared to stand against them. The word appeared, brighter than all the others, hanging over Felix Duval's head like a death sentence. Flagged. The repo agents glided forward. Their movement was a single, synchronized act of will. They were the system's immune response, coming to excise a foreign body. Felix didn't try to run. He just watched them come, his face a landscape of exhausted grief. He had fought his fight with reason and lost. Now, all that was left was the final, quiet audit. As the agents closed the distance, a new window opened in the corner of my HUD. It was a feed, raw and unflagged, showing a calm, well-lit observation deck high in the system's upper strata. Two figures stood before a panoramic view of the chaos below. One was Life Connery, holding a cup, his expression one of mild impatience, as if waiting for a routine diagnostic to finish. The other was a formal blank silhouette I knew could only be Jonas Roth. They weren't directing the agents. They weren't cackling over a control panel. They were simply observing, signing off, ensuring the paperwork on this quarterly purge was in order before moving on to other business. The sheer, bureaucratic indifference of it all was the final push. It wasn't the monstrous agents who were the true enemy. It was the calm, detached men who let them off the leash and called it maintaining integrity. I looked from their placid faces on my screen to Felix, kneeling on the floor, waiting for his own erasure. I looked at the two files Merrick had given me. The door out, or the gun. Survival or defiance. There was no choice, not anymore. To run was to let them win. to let them be right, to become another one of Merrick's ghosts, haunted by what I hadn't done. The passivity that had defined my life was a habit I could no longer justify. It was a debt, and the collectors had finally come for me too. My mind latched onto the second file. I selected it. Run, kill, switch. My command was a whisper in the roaring chaos of my own mind. Target, active reconciliation stream. Zone, basic halls, sector gamma. The world broke. The thrum of the audit became a deafening, tearing roar. The amber light of the corridor strobed violently, flashing between blinding white and absolute black. The repo agents, who had just been reaching for Felix, recoiled as if struck by lightning. Their smooth gliding motion shattered. They began to thrash, their bodies convulsing, their faceless heads thrown back. The static that concealed their features erupted outward, and for the first time, they made a sound. It was a scream, but not a human one. It was the shriek of 1,000 corrupted audio files playing at once, a sound of pure digital agony. Their connection to the ledger, to the source of their power, was being ripped away, and they were coming apart at the seams. Felix was safe, the gun had worked. But then came the backfire. The warning on the file had not been an exaggeration. Catastrophic data corruption to user. A pressure, immense and sharp, slammed into my avatar. It felt like my digital spine was being torn out. A searing, white-hot line of pain shot from the base of my skull to the tips of my fingers. My view of the hall, of Felix, of the screaming, dissolving agents fractured into a million pieces. My consciousness was being flooded. It wasn't darkness, it was everything. Every line of code, every resident file, every log entry, every forgotten memory stored in the system's deep archives was rushing into me all at once. It was a tidal wave of pure information, and it was tearing me apart. I felt my own memories, my own name, my own sense of self being shredded and scattered into the torrent. The last thing I saw was my own hand, the one that had glitched, dissolving not into pixels this time, but into a stream of raw, glowing letters and numbers, flowing away from me, into the screaming white static of the system's core. Then, even that was gone. There was only the roar, the light, the pressure. Then, nothing. It has been a year since the night they now call the audit of Sector Gamma. From his small, customized room in the basic halls, Felix Duval maintains his watch. He is still the leader of his community, but he is no longer a mayor. He is a keeper of a fragile, terrified peace. He looks older now, the lines on his face deeper, his digital beard threaded with more grey. He rarely smiles. The skepticism that was once his shield is long gone, replaced by a weary, unshakable vigilance. Afterlife Inc. calls what happened a critical server cascade initiated by a rogue agent. They tightened the rules. New integrity checks are frequent and intrusive. Audit nights are harsher, more efficient. The company's grip is tighter than ever. Leif Connery was promoted. Jonas Roth's office issued a memo on the importance of absolute compliance. The system, on its surface, continues. But underneath, everything has changed. The residents whisper a new story, a new myth to replace the old ones. They don't talk about phantom collectors anymore. They know those are real. They talk about the Mills glitch. They say there is a ghost in the machine, a chaotic force that sometimes lashes out at the system itself. A resident flagged for reconciliation will suddenly find their connections severed, their name vanishing from the audit queue. An entire block under lockdown will see the barriers dissolve into static. These events are rare, unpredictable, and always messy. They leave behind corrupted data, fragmented memories, and a lingering hum of raw code. They are miracles that feel like wounds. Dane Mills's final defiant act hadn't been a clean victory. He didn't destroy the ledger. He didn't end the hunts. He had been a man defined by his passivity, his instinct to avoid confrontation. In his last moment, He had swung the other way completely, choosing not precision, but chaos. He hadn't dismantled the machine. He had just thrown a wrench in the gears. His legacy isn't one of salvation. It is one of radical, terrifying uncertainty. He introduced a new monster to fight the old one, and no one knows which is worse. Tonight, Felix is not in his own sector. He is exploring the forgotten parts of the system, the abandoned server nodes and empty, unrendered corridors that Bram Orlick, before he quit his job and vanished from all records, had taught him how to find. It is what he does now. He searches the digital wilderness, not for answers, but for signs. He finds it in a null-space corridor, a place of pure digital decay where the walls bleed static. It's a flickering patch on the wall, a wound in the code that refuses to heal. From it, a quiet looping sound emerges, a soft, dry whisper. He steps closer. Within the churning static, a single line of text resolves itself, hangs there for a moment, and dissolves, only to reappear a second later. Over and over. A broken piece of a man's consciousness caught in a permanent, unresolvable loop. A digital ghost, forever asking the question that had started it all. Felix stands there for a long time, bearing witness, a silent vigil for the agent who had traded his own peace for theirs. The text flickers and he reads the words one last time. I don't know what I owe.